he said, "Ma, what's it like to die?" And I told him it doesn't hurt. And I had learned that for the soul, it's just passing from one room, from one reality to another reality. And that a Jew says Shema before they pass. And he knew, he had that premonition that I was clueless at that point and didn't really think that the end was near. It's painful. Listen, nobody wants anybody to suffer. But I want to say that I wish I made up this expression. I did not. But it's not that we are human beings having a spiritual experience. Rather, we are spiritual beings having a human experience.
Welcome to Ordinary People with Extraordinary Stories. I'm Chana Weisberg, host of this podcast. Joining me today, we have Chaya Teldon, who, together with her husband, is a Chabad emissary in Long Island, New York, overseeing about 50, close over 50 other shluchos families, as well as close to 40 institutions there in Long Island. Chaya, thank you so much. Welcome for joining. Welcome to our program, and thank you for joining us.
A pleasure.
So Chaya, let's start a little bit. I mean, there's so many aspects of this conversation that I want to delve into with you, but let's start with your background, where you came from.
Okay, I'm originally from Motown, from Detroit, and grew up there, mildly conservative family. Knew my grandparents, my great-grandparents, and they left a positive impression on me. And I went to Hebrew school from when I was 3. I actually went to Yiddish Ring, a workman circle, when I was a kid. And when we moved from Detroit to the suburbs, my parents wanted me to go to a new Hebrew school, and Chabad was close. So that's my collection, my original introduction to Chabad. I went for a few years.
So it was you took a journey together with your family? Your family became... No.
Just me.
No.
Just
me.
you.
Okay.
Yeah. My siblings not, my parents not. And I decided when I was in 10th grade, I wanted to go to yeshiva. I wrote to the Rebbe. I got a beautiful answer. And then I had to tell my parents, surprise, I want to go to yeshiva. And it's Hasidic and all that conjured up in their mind. And it was not smooth. But in April, after Pesach, when I was in 10th grade, I came to New York. I went to Beis Rivka. They were not ready for newcomers to the system. So we were just thrown. I came with another 2 girls. We were just thrown into mainstream. And looking back, I'm blessed that happened. But there were no accommodations. There was no machina. There was no special classes for one to catch up. So it was kind of like sink or swim.
Wow!
I think I swam.
You swam. Yeah. You definitely swam.
You
swam to the finish though. But that must have been difficult.
It was incredibly difficult. My parents, at a certain point, were insulted that I chose to move forward, and it was not smooth. I'm the good kid in the family, and I never gave my parents a moment's grief. And they thought I fell off the wagon, actually, that here I'm going to a yeshiva far away. They did not provide any monetary support. The Shliach Rabbi Yankel Krantz, Elver Shalom, paid for my plane fare, my tuition, my room and board for many years until I could do it on my own.
Wow. Did they reconcile with this decision in later years, or?
Later is the optimal word. It took them many years. Actually, when I got engaged and got married and they had grandchildren, I said to my mother once, Ma, seriously, you have nachas from me, you have grandchildren, put it down already. Put it down. And they did, and they had much nachas later on in years.
Wow. So like I'm wondering what it took in you, to as a teenage girl, 10th grade, you're 15 years
Yeah,
old, 16 years
15.
old, to make such a decision. What was it that so attracted you that you were ready to go against your parents in such a way as a good kid
Right.
and to make such a huge leap of a decision?
It's a good question. I don't think there's anything specific. I'm going to say that I believe that the Rebbe's bracha and the Rebbe's vision, long-term vision, is what carried me on. I had never, like I said, I was a good kid, and to be distanced from my parents was very, very challenging. But I had encountered truth, and when you encounter truth, then you're going to stand up for it and fight for it. And I did.
Hmm.
There were some lonely years, but you know what? Here we are to tell the tale, and I thank God every day that my number was called, so to speak, and here I am.
Wow, incredible. So what is there something that happened that made you attracted to it, that made you say I'm going to do that, that made you say I'm so attracted to leaving?
Not really, but I think when you get a whiff of truth, in Hebrew school, in Chabad Hebrew school, you encounter the emes, you encounter solid foundation, morals, history, and I think that my grandparents from on high were rooting for me, and
Mm.
um, and here we are.
Did you think that when you left for 10th grade that this was the life that you wanted to lead, like a very
Absolutely,
religious lifestyle? You knew
absolutely.
that.
On
Wow.
Friday, I went to public school, said goodbye to my friends. I'm going to yeshiva, and on Sunday, I was a Lubavitcher girl, and on Monday, I walked into Beis Rivka, the Lubavitch Girls
Base
High School.
Base Rivka, which is the Lubavitch Girls High School
Right,
from in Crown Heights, which is totally, completely Hasidic, religious.
completely. And my
Right.
personality, I'm kind of, so I walked in, 25 girls turned to the door, and I said, hi. And there
Uh,
were like 50 eyeballs, just like, hello, what is this? But you know what? It worked. It really
it
worked.
works.
Yeah, thank God.
Like you said, it was sink or swim, and you definitely
Yeah,
swam.
yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Wow. Did you think then that you would end up being an emissary, a shlucha of the Rebbe? Was that part of your vision?
The mood in Lubavitch then, this was in the late, um, no, this was in the early 70s. I'm not giving away my age, but in the early
Right.
70s. And that was the focal point. Ufaratsta, we are going to go out and we're going to conquer the world. And absolutely, this was my dream. And I didn't look to the left or to the right. And when I was older, in terms of dating, it was only going on shlichus, moving out to wherever the Rebbe would send us, if we would have the privilege of being chosen as shluchim, as emissaries. That's what I wanted. And God, we're almost 50 years here on Long Island, so it's a long time.
Amazing. Wow. It's just so interesting because you're now on the other side. You were someone who was attracted to it. Now you're on the other side helping people who are feeling that
Right,
attraction to Yiddishkeit.
right. And I think people find it somewhat easier when they know your background a little bit and they can relate and know that you were on the other side and yet you
Right.
chose this lifestyle. There's a bond that takes place there.
Interesting. And how did you meet your husband? I mean, your parents weren't involved, obviously.
Matchmaker. Yes. I'd like to say actually that the esteemed Lubavitcher Rabbi Moshe Kotlarski of blessed memory was our matchmaker. My husband was a Shabbos guest every week in his home. He and his wife
Mm,
Rivka, and he said, "I've got a guy for you," and the rest is history.
wow. And was his background similar to yours?
Mm, Not. My husband is also about tshuva. He came to Yiddishkeit, to Judaism later in life, but he did not have as strong a Jewish foundation as I was blessed with. He encountered Chabad when he was in college, and
Mm,
he's very smart, my husband. He went from zero to ordination in 5 years. So he
Incredible.
hit the
Wow.
books, and he also swam.
Incredible. Really incredible. In your early years, tell us about your shlichus a little bit. You were in Long Island.
Yeah.
Tell us what you do there.
So originally, in the late 70s, there was a Hebrew Christian group that specifically was desirous of targeting Jewish students on campus at the State University of Stony Brook. And people from the community there called Chabad headquarters in Brooklyn and asked for somebody to fight the missionaries. Now, my husband and I had a few offers to go on shlichus, to move out to places. They were in Europe. And then this offer came about, and we said, listen, we're apple pie, homegrown American kids. We could do this. And so we moved to the State University at Stony Brook. I'm happy to say after a few years, the missionaries left. We did
Wow.
battle. We did battle. The early years were hard. There was no housing near the campus that we could find. So for 1 year, every Shabbat, my husband packed up and spent the Sabbath on campus. I stayed home with my then 2 little kids by myself.
Wow.
And it
That's a
was challenging.
sacrifice.
Yeah, it really was. But it was
Sure.
certainly worth it. But those were tough years.
Did you have any special training in missionary and fighting missionaries? Like, how
So
did you know what to
yeah,
do?
it's interesting. We did study. There were a few books out, very, very sparse selection of choices. My husband did study some, he didn't study the New Testament, but he familiarized himself with the responses, Isaiah 53, with famous quotes that were used. And also part of the beauty of Shabbat came through when we would invite Jewish students to come to our home for Friday night dinner. And Shabbos day, my husband would then spend on campus after we got housing that was suitable for students to walk. And the beauty, the value of family, and I see it around the world. I have the opportunity now to travel to many Chabad houses and to talk and to share. People are impressed, jealous of the Jewish family and what they see. So that
Hmm.
really touched many, many students.
I understand there's also a fun fact that you were actually talking about Shabbos, that you were on the Oprah Winfrey show, the Hasidic
Yes.
Shabbos. Tell us a little
just
about that.
just a quick, my dear friend Sterna Ginsburg, who's Chabad of Borough Park, her husband picked up the phone once in his office instead of the secretary, and they said, it's the Harpo Studios. We're interested in Hasidic women. And he didn't know actually who they were. And he said, send me a text, and he hung up. So thank God at night, he said something about Oprah, Schmopra, I don't know what. So his wife, thank God, said, I think we should pay attention to this, called Chabad public relations office, and the rest is history. She did not want to focus on Chabad women per se, but most everybody else in the Hasidic world did not want to play with her. So
Hmm.
of the 4 women, 3 were Chabad and 1 was a friend of Chabad. And it was
Interesting.
fascinating, absolutely fascinating. I'll just cut to the end.
Please, sure.
She went the next day to India to do her next segment, but she told one of the producers she's done 4,000 interviews, 20 some years. She said, I did education, marriage, community, children. She said, I saw it all come together here.
Hmm.
So I think
What do
that's
you think she meant by that?
she asked us many questions about family, about education, about um, the integrity of a marriage, and she was impressed. She really was
Hmm.
impressed. She had said she'd been in New York many times. She saw Hasidic men, but she didn't quite know what Hasidic women look like, and that was her interest in the interview.
Very interesting. Wow. Was there any specific question that stands out from what she asked you?
She wanted to know what keeps it all together. How
Right.
do we manage? And having, if we're so blessed, a large household, how do you juggle? How do you keep all the plates spinning? And I think we did a good job in answering her.
I'm sure you did. Okay.
Right.
Wow. So then you're now living in Long Island. You moved to Long Island. You had children. Now I understand that your youngest child passed away. Can
Our-
you tell us a little about that?
yeah, it was my oldest, my oldest,
Oh, your oldest.
my
Sorry, your
oldest, and it's
oldest.
okay. So our oldest son was born with cystic fibrosis. We did not know what that was until he was born. And then we were flung into this.
How long ago was this? Like how many years ago about?
He was born in 78. There was
Mhm.
no genetic testing in the Jewish world then. It was obvious that my husband and I are both carriers of the CF gene.
Mm.
Thank God my other children were all tested. We did, I'm going to say, have the courage to have more children because there's a 1 in 4 chance, 25% with each birth, that the child could have cystic fibrosis. And we were sincere, tmimistic, pure believers, and said, okay, God, you gave us this test, please, no more. In fact, every morning
Mm.
in blessings, we say, don't test me, God. And it was a journey. Other kids,
What was it like to be pregnant, knowing that a child might be born with cystic fibrosis?
you know, there's a beautiful Hasidic adage, if you hold on top, you don't fall below. And
Mm.
I'm a real simple meat and potatoes kind of believer. And I said, listen, God, Dayenu, we have one test. Could you not test me with any more? And our son fought a courageous battle. The nature of the illness is that it gets progressively worse. You can't breathe too well. Finally, there was no more options except a double lung transplant. And the best center in the United States was in St. Louis. My in-laws happened to live 4 blocks from the transplant
Wow.
center there. So
Wow.
my son and I moved there. My husband became Mr. Mom. He stayed home
Mhm.
with my other 4 kids. And he had the transplant. It was amazing. He was able to celebrate his bar mitzvah. The best scene to me was Baruch on a chair with his doctor here from the cystic fibrosis transplant team. And they were both held in a chair aloft, and it was beautiful. And because it was such a new procedure, rejection set in. And let's see, the bar mitzvah was in March, and in June he passed away. He was listed for a second transplant, but it did not come quick enough. And then you're left to deal with yourself, with your family, with the community. All eyes are on you. Rabbi Rebbetzin, how could this happen? You work for God. We thought God, you have protexia. And we had to share with people there's no such thing as protexia. We all have our path in life. At his bar mitzvah, Baruch said, we all have tests in life. My luck, I got a hard test. Those were his words. It took my husband 25 years. He wrote a book called 8 Paths of Purpose on how he dealt with his loss and how he processed. I learned in the years that men and women process differently, and that's okay. As God made us different, we experience and we process things differently, and that's fine. Till I learned that, took me a while. I'm a slow learner, but eventually we got it together, and I'm happy to say now, after many, many years, I have a few grandchildren who carry Baruch's name, and it's a living testimony to the idea that people pass, but relationships don't end. And I feel that as my grandchildren thrive and grow and do good in this world, that they're keeping his legacy alive, and we're blessed for that.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow. That's um so there's so much to unpack here. I'm not
yeah,
sure even where
yeah.
to start. What was it like watching your child suffer? How did you manage that?
Um, it's interesting. I would like to say that I'm wiser now than I was then. I just had to put one foot in front of the other. I was not as emotionally savvy and psychologically aware, self-aware when my kids were growing up. We had many talks. I used to tell my son stories about great righteous people and how they lived their lives and how they passed. I wanted him to have that
Mm.
tool in his toolbox.
That was very wise. That's very
That was one
wise.
of the, I wasn't so wise then, but thank God.
Wow.
He passed away on a Monday. On that Shabbos, my husband and I were both in St. Louis, awaiting another transplant. And he said, "Ma, what's it like to die?" And I told him it doesn't hurt. And I had learned that for the soul, it's just passing from one room, from one reality to another reality. And that a Jew says Shema before they pass. And he knew, he had that premonition that I was clueless at that point and didn't really think that the end was near. It's painful. Listen, nobody wants anybody to suffer. But I want to say that I wish I made up this expression. I did not. But it's not that we are human beings having a spiritual experience. Rather, we are spiritual beings having a human experience.
Mm.
And that transition from being absolutely human to spirit is invaluable. I found after he passed away, in dealing with many families in the grief community, that unfortunately they're bereft of tools in their toolbox. You know, it's terrible if
Right.
you go to fish and you think you have your tackle box and you open it up and it's really your hammer and your wrench and your screwdriver. You took the wrong box. So
Mm.
when you can acquire, and Torah provides us with such wonderful tools, and Hasidic philosophy takes it to the next dimension. You you're sad, but you're not. You don't have to be broken by it. There's a part of me that's what the Kabbalah says. You have left ventricle and a right ventricle to feel two seemingly opposite emotions at the same time. It's possible. You can have tears of joy. I can marry off children and know in my heart that there's somebody missing, and yet be able to dance with full joy and happiness, because this is life, and there's no promises and there's no guarantees, just how we respond to painful situations.
I'm like sitting in awe a little bit. Like, how do you get to that point of such acceptance?
The opposite is lousy. You know, fighting. there's I've met many people who haven't accepted, and that's so sad. I don't need to take medication, although medication is there for people who need it. But at a certain point, I say, like they say in AA, I think, let go, let God. God runs the world. And he didn't blink on this. God is fully present in every step of our lives. God has my back. You know, when we were sitting Shiva, one of my friends, in goodness and kindness, said to me, "You know, Chaya, maybe it would have been better if he hadn't been born."
Right.
And I thought, oh my gosh, you don't say that to a mother. But
Right.
the world would have been missing him if he
Mm.
wasn't here. He had a purpose here, and in the hospital, he used to be on the lookout for kosher trays. And when I would come, he would say, "Ma, 216, somebody asked for her kosher tray. Go visit them." So he was the shliach. He was the emissary in the hospital. He was a good kid, like he said, a mazel that he was here for a short time. That's it. But life
Wow.
continues. Life continues. We don't forget, but we have a choice in everything in life how to respond to painful, or not even painful, questionable. I don't understand everything in my life. And that's okay.
Mm.
It's okay. God didn't, if I knew everything, I'd be God. So he says,
Right.
calm down, Chaya. You're not God. There will, there's three categories of mitzvahs: logical mitzvahs that come with explanation, and then mitzvahs that God says, because I'm God, that's why. And in a relationship as well, between a husband and a wife, I understand things. Some things come with explanation. And if I live 7 lives, there are certain things about my husband I won't understand. So do I throw away the relationship just because I don't understand it, because I don't like it? No, I'm in it. I think we're in it for the long haul. And it's okay that I don't understand everything. It takes a little humility to say, okay, God, I'm trusting you on this.
So what are some, like you said, some people don't have the tools, the toolbox to deal with it. When you're feeling that overwhelming grief and that overwhelming why did this happen? What are the tools that you use?
So I put down the why. I just know that he was meant to be here for 13 years and change. And I wish it was longer, but alas. So I know God, he doesn't have to have a reason. His soul was meant to be part of our family. It's affected myself, my husband, my community, and my kids. My youngest, my daughter, never met him. I was expecting, actually, when Baruch passed away. So she never met him. But my other kids, it affected them in their attitude, in their acceptance, in their journey. They were meant to have a
How did
sibling.
you deal with that? What did you tell them?
You know, we had an initial conversation, but like I said, I wasn't so smart. I wasn't so savvy then. As adults, we've had those conversations, but I wasn't so attuned to that. I had 4 little kids, and I had,
Right.
I was expecting, and we just, managing every day is also not so
I can't even imagine expecting, not knowing even if this child has CF
right,
as well,
right.
while your child is just passed away,
Yeah.
dealing with your other children.
It was it. I'm glad we're past that. I don't wish it on anybody. I use what I learned then, hopefully, to help other people, and life continues. People who don't have a basic belief system are behind the 8 ball. It's so sad, because
Mhm.
I believe there's a God in the world, and He has a reason and a plan for everything. Some I'm privy to, and some I'm not. That's what happens. That's how it goes. That's just how it goes.
Do you cry? Do you express anger to this God?
No, not anymore. I'm sad sometimes. I'm sad. I'm not. I'm not in pain. Every once in a while, I could reach for a salad dressing in the grocery store. It's like, oh man, he liked that so much. I could have my moments. I really could. And it's many years. Mm, it's more than 30 years. But
Wow.
sometimes it's a minute. Sometimes it's just a minute. But I'm not angry. I never was angry with God. I was sad. Um, that's all.
Wow. You mentioned that men and women process it, or at least your husband and you processed it differently. How did it work for him? How did he process it versus how you did?
Uh, he was he was. I don't want to speak for him, but he was sad for a long time. And you know, men, fathers are supposed to be the protectors, and they're supposed to defend and really protect. And although he knew logically that this had nothing to do with him and his abilities to protect, your heart tells you something different. So he had to make
Right.
peace with his head and his heart. And because he's a bardas, he's a very head person. It
He struggled with
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. But now we
Did that affect your relationship?
then
The
it did.
different ways that you
Then it
grieve?
did. But on the list of 10 things that could break up a marriage, moving
Of course.
is one of them, and
Sure.
the loss of a child is one of them.
Child, absolutely.
It's a tough one. But we are normal, healthy, happy people today.
Right.
And that doesn't mean we've forgotten. It just means, like I say, I can move it around in my heart, front burner, back burner, and I think that's a healthy way to be.
to be right. Wow. I'm wondering also, as this shlucha, as this rebbetzin, as this rabbi's wife in the community, the spiritual person who people look up to, did you feel you could show what your true feelings were at the time, or did you feel like you had to sort of act in a certain way?
Um,
I mean, I'm sure people, like you said, people were
but
looking at Chaya.
you know what? What one thing I'll flip it. One thing that I learned since Baruch passed away and dealing with loss is where I used to be comfortable saying, I'm not going to a house of Shiva because they really want the rabbi to go. Or you see
Mm,
somebody on the street who just suffered a loss and you would cross the street because, oh my gosh, you don't know what to say. So
right.
I was like I said, I was expecting my daughter when, my only girl, by the way, when
Mm,
Baruch passed away. I was in the hospital for whatever reason for 6 weeks before she was born. Basically, nobody came to visit. Basically,
wow.
people were afraid
Scared.
and didn't know what to say. So they
Of
just
course.
didn't. So that's one of the things that I learned, that don't be a chicken. You can say to a person, I really don't know what to say, but I'm here for you and I'm here with you. And
Hmm.
that's a kind thing to do. Show up and sit quietly. It's okay. It's okay.
Right. Right. Are there any do's or don'ts that you learned, like that we should know, that people should know when they are approaching such a situation?
Don't say. One of my friends who's also lost a child said we should write a book. You know, they have taxes for dummies or hiking for dummies. We want to write mourning for dummies. You know, don't say, oh, you have other children, or you should have other children, or
Mhm.
don't talk about when your dog died. Like, seriously, please do me a favor. If you don't know what to
Right.
say, in fact, the
Don't.
Code of Jewish
Right.
law says sit quietly in the house of a mourner unless the mourner speaks to you. Many
Mm.
people don't want to be distracted. Maybe they want to talk about their loved one. They want to talk about their loss. Ask them, how many years were you married? Ask them, you know, tell me your favorite story. But otherwise, just be quiet.
Right. Wow. I know you help people now who are going through grief as well. What do you say or do for them that you feel makes a difference?
So I find in one particular circle of friends, they want to know where their loved one is.
Mhm.
And for many
Mhm.
people who've gone through the system, or most Hebrew schools today don't, I mean, Chabad does, but other Hebrew schools don't talk about souls. They don't talk,
Mhm.
they don't talk about the world to come. And people are so happy to know that we can connect with the other side. You can do a mitzvah. Why does it say in a prayer book in your synagogue, this is in memory of, why? Because every time somebody prays out of that prayer book, the credit goes to the soul, to the account of the person
Mhm.
who's gone. So we can touch the lives of others, even though they're not here. We can communicate with them. And the only pain they feel is ours. So if we can
Mhm.
express our sadness, but not minimize it, not wash over it, we have to feel our feelings, but don't live in the past. Live in the present and move towards the future. That's a
Mhm.
healthy way to be. You want to have a good cry? Go for it. But then get up and do something positive.
Hmm. You mean excessive grief
Grief,
is going
yeah,
to cause
it's not
pain to
kosher.
the to
Yeah,
the
and it's not kosher.
right.
It's just not healthy. There is a loss. Listen, you suffered a loss. Your father passed, correct?
And when you say, like, knowing where your father, like knowing where the soul is, I was obsessed with that. Like, where is he right now? The first
Yeah,
first week, the
yeah,
30 days,
yeah.
the first year. You really want to understand that 100% and what you can do for that person.
Exactly. So the language that is spoken where they are now is spiritual. We have to, use Google Translate and do spiritual things for the soul of that person. And it's like a dormant bank account. We can make deposits in their account each time we do this, and we say, this one's for you. When my mother passed away, I had a 11-month candle, right, burning. Every time I came downstairs that year, I said, ooh, good morning, Ma. And then,
It's true.
and then,
I do the same,
yes.
yes.
And when that candle was finished, it was like, okay, next phase. I have to do it without that physical reminder now. Now it's up to me. And periodically, if I'm making a recipe for my mother, if I'm saying, Ma, you would have such nachas, some joy from this. So it gets more challenging, but it's
Hmm.
doable. We have to speak the soul's language.
Wow, that's incredible. And do people, when you explain this to people, does that give them some kind of solace?
I think so. Soulless, we could spell it Soul, right? Soulless.
Right.
Um, but I encourage people to start with one mitzvah. One mitzvah.
Right.
Give charity every day, a coin, and say, Ma, this is for you. Or learn something, or volunteer. Something good that is done on behalf of that person. And
Someone actually told me to have a separate pushka, a separate charity
oh,
box,
nice.
just for my yeah. So the first, like right after we got back from the shiva, we went out to buy the separate charity box, and I give in my regular one, and then in my father's.
Beautiful. I have a
Yeah.
charity box in the shape of a tefillin that my son got for his bar
Oh
mitzvah,
wow.
and that is his pushka. And we use that money to purchase tefillin for others. So every time it's full, I empty it out, and my husband goes to the scribe, and
Wow.
we continue his love of tefillin in that way.
That's beautiful.
Yeah,
That's really beautiful.
yeah.
Did you ever feel like I wish there was testing, genetic testing earlier, like
Nah, you
before
know
in
what?
my time?
Because
No, you didn't even think that.
obviously it was bashert. I can't argue with providence, with things that were meant to transpire. You know, y- could have could have married
Could
somebody
have, should
else.
have.
Yeah, you know what?
Right.
And then it wouldn't have had the gene. He wouldn't have had the gene.
Right.
Nah, I told you I'm just a simple believer. This is what was meant to be, to impact us, my kids, and my community. And
So you never have these like niggling thoughts, like what if he would have had a transplant? What if a
once
second transplant?
once in a blue moon, I will like be startled and say, did we turn over that rock? Like, did we look into? Did we?
Right.
But
Right. There's
no,
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 it's not, there's no purpose to
no,
that, to go down that route.
no,
Right. So
because
you stop yourself? You just don't let yourself think that
yeah.
way?
And you know what? Sometimes people say, "Oh, how would he be? How old would he be now?" And I'll tell you my honest
Right.
answer. I say he wasn't meant to be 40. He was meant to be 13 years. That was
Wow.
in the cards. That was meant to
Wow.
be. So I let go of that a long time ago. And I find it's very healthy to do that because it's true. He was
Right.
destined to be here, as each of us are. We wish till 120. My sister once said to me, give a person a blessing. I wish you long life till 121. You shouldn't die suddenly. So till 120, we wish people. And that's
Right.
the rest is in God's hands. We have to show up each day and live our life to the fullest, to the best we can. And I love to say with joy, I'm a happy person, and I love to dance, and I like to bring joy to other people. And
Has this experience changed you in any way?
it has changed me, but I think I'm more appreciative and more accepting of life's realities.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. I know you also are a part of the chevra kadisha. Was that because of your son's
Mm.
passing, or is that something separate?
So
You're involved with chevra kadisha, is the burial society for those who do not know, who actually do the tahara, the different rituals on the dead body
right.
before it is buried.
Um, Not so much connected with my son, more with my mother. My mother, for a brief period, my parents lived in Omaha, Nebraska, and my mother was once asked to participate in the preparation, to send off a woman on her final journey, and that stayed with me. And then one of my, I don't know how you translate machatunim, my married child's
In-laws?
mother, not my in-laws,
Right.
my kids' in-laws,
Right.
works for the chevra kadisha. And I thought, you know what? That would be such a tribute to my mother. So I
Mm.
have the privilege of participating in the taras, in preparing a woman for her final journey. And I'll just do one commercial for that. I don't think there's any other culture or society that defines dignity in such an incredible way as the process that takes place in preparing a woman for her burial.
A
Cremation.
woman or a man, but a
Yes,
woman does
right.
a woman
Sorry.
and a
Yeah,
man does a
thank
man,
you.
right?
Cremation is
Right.
not kosher. We do not subscribe to cremation. But this, just last night, I participated in a tara, an elderly woman. She was frail. She was a little bit compromised physically, not so clean. We were able to wash her and dress her in the most dignified fashion. There's no talking in the room. It's all about the deceased. We sent her off in sparkling white garments. It was such a privilege to do that, and I put that on my mother's account.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow. Do you remember the first time that you did it? I mean, it must have been like you've done it now for a long time, but the first time you must have been a little,
I was.
caught off guard to
Yeah,
to
I
be in
was.
the room
I
with a
was. Yes, and all the other women were very experienced, like senior rebbetzins, I and there I was. But you know what? I learn on the job, and the organization is amazing. Every Jewish community basically has or will bring people, um, if there's no permanent organization there to take care of the deceased, and these are people that lived a life. It's not just a name on a casket. And sometimes as I'm working on a woman, I wonder, what was your life like? I'm cleaning her nails and I'm
Mhm.
thinking, I hope you had a manicure in your life. I hope someone gave you hand cream so you lived a comfortable life. And then we send them off. What a privilege. And we say a prayer, we ask for forgiveness if I was not delicate enough, if I did something that wasn't proper. What a privilege. What a mitzvah. Judaism is just from beginning to end, from when we come in
Wow.
this world and when we go out. And
It
there's a
do you
famous
think it's
poem called The
uh,
Dash, and it's you can find it online. It's about the year you were born and the year you passed away, and life is the dash in
the
between.
Dutch.
And
Wow.
and that is our life. We got to show up because nobody else could live our lives except us.
Wow. Do you think it's for everybody to be a part of the chevra kadisha? Could anyone do it? What do you
Um,
think?
the, you have to you have to be emotionally sound. Last week,
Mhm.
I participated in a Zoom where a woman from Israel is in the IDF chevra kadisha. It
Wow.
was an unbelievable talk on how she got involved, how she was conscripted into the army, um, prior just doing chevra kadisha for community members, and what they've seen and the dignity. Do you know that in Israel, basically everyone is buried just in shrouds, and you've seen unfortunately images. Do you know all soldiers are buried in a coffin?
In a
Because
coffin, really? I didn't know
I
that.
didn't know that either, because maybe there's less than, maybe the body's been compromised and you don't want anybody to know that. And
Mm,
therefore, the soldiers are buried in coffins. Even that sensitivity. We are
mm,
such a wise, sensitive nation. We are just godly. The Jewish people
mm.
are godly beings, and the system that we inherited is godly.
Wow. Wow. So you were saying someone has to be like of sound mind emotionally.
Emotionally, in the most chevra kadishas will ask that the person is a Sabbath observer.
Mhm.
Other communities have developed their own chevra's kadisha, but I think you have to be emotionally sound, and
Mm-hmm.
you have to be physically strong. There's a lot of physical carrying water, pouring water, moving the
Mm-hmm.
body. You have to, yeah. And then you have to
Mm-hmm.
be able to decompress sometimes when you come home. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's really
That's why I was just going to ask you, like, how do you decompress when you finish? And
usually
do you think about your son at that time
mm,
ever, or no?
not usually. Usually,
No.
it might sound strange, but I'm on a high, meaning
Mm-hmm.
I did right by this woman. We
Mm-hmm.
sent her off. She came in like this, and we sent her off in a pristine state. How fortunate we are, and how fortunate that woman is. So I'm really, really happy. Like sometimes I see unpleasant things. I come home. Sometimes I will take a drink of wine. Sometimes I will take a piece of chocolate, whatever's going to float my boat. And
Right.
but
Sometimes both chocolate and wine.
there
What could
you
be
go.
better,
There you
right?
go. Sometimes it's late at night. My husband is already asleep, and I can't. I don't dump on him, and I don't
Right.
talk. I don't share names or details or anything. But I could say, "Oh, that was a tough one. That was a tough one,"
Right.
and he'll just sometimes sit and help me decompress. But it's a privilege.
Because of the state that the body's in,
Yeah,
you mean? That was a
yeah,
tough one? Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Wow. Wow. You mentioned also cremation. There's a lot of cremation going on right now?
More than 50% in the Jewish community. It is a travesty. Is it less costly? Yeah. There are funds to help pay for burials. There are people we've seen many times posted on Chabad.org, even where funds have been raised for communities where there's a deceased person who has no family. They have to pay for the burial. We don't, not comparing it to the Holocaust, even where people were burned in the crematoriums. It's barbaric. We don't do that. That other cultures do that. That's their business. Jews don't do that. We I heard someone speaking on cremation, and he said, when a pet dies, you don't take out the barbecue, and you
Hmm.
know you there's for sure on Long Island, my liberal community. There's many pet cemeteries here where one buries
Mm.
their pet. The and spiritually, just like we take a desecrated Torah, God forbid, or a prayer book, and we bury it with the appropriate dignity, a body housed a soul. So
Hmm.
the body takes on that holiness. You don't just toss it in the garbage. We don't just, you know, put it in a crematorium.
Right.
It became holy. A mezuzah that's no longer fit for use, tefillin, we dispose of it properly. And so how much more so a body that lived for 70, 80, 120 years and housed a holy soul.
That's beautiful. That's really beautiful. Chaya, looking back at your various stages in your life, and there were so many different parts to it, good ones and ones that may not seem so good. Uh, when you look back at your life, what would you say to that younger version of yourself?
You go, girl. I'm
You absolutely.
I'm so happy. Like I wouldn't want to be my younger self anymore. I'm very happy to have reached this age and this stage. I pray that I'm wiser, that I'm more patient, that I'm more gentle, that I'm more knowledgeable. This is my journey. When the Jews left Egypt, there were how many journeys? 40, 41, 42 journeys, um, each marking a different stage. The sages tell us that we all have those journeys as well. And we were meant to travel the road that we've traveled on. And I hope that each stop left me a little bit wiser. I look back sometimes and say, where are my mistakes? Where do I have to um, um, repair? And there are places where I have to say, I'm sorry. I didn't know, I didn't realize I wasn't sensitive enough. And you have to be I don't want to say a big person. You have to be a little humble and
Mm-hmm.
say I'm sorry,
Mm-hmm.
and fix what we can. But not everything can be fixed. As long as we've expressed our sadness at having messed up, and saying,
Right.
if I have an opportunity to encounter that same scenario again, I will choose differently. I hope I will choose the high road. But all of us, this is the life that we were meant to lead thus far. And moving
Mm-hmm.
forward, I hope I have tools, or I feel now I know where to get tools.
Mm-hmm.
We know where to acquire tools. Go to Chabad.org.
Mm-hmm.
There's a plethora of
Right.
information now. When I
Mm-hmm.
first came around, I don't know, there were 20 books in English, there just
Mm-hmm.
wasn't. Now there's no excuse for somebody. There used to be a store on Long Island called Sims, and their tagline was, an educated consumer is our best customer. And it's true. We can
Mm-hmm.
all be educated consumers now. There's no reason under the sun for anybody to be an illiterate or an ignorant, uneducated Jewish person. No excuse.
Right. Beautiful. Wow. Last question. When you look back at your life, what do you think is your biggest accomplishment?
Woo, that's a tough one.
Hmm.
That's a tough one. I mean, I could say my family, my kids, thank God, my community, the honor and privilege of being a shlucha, of being an emissary of the Rebbe, and I'll cry, trying to make the world a better place, and ultimately to bring Mashiach, where the world will put down their swords and they will stop playing foolish games. They will stop pointing fingers, and we can all live in peace and harmony as God wanted it to be. Let's just do it already. And when women light Shabbat candles, that's just another reminder we are the keepers of the light. Let's bring light into the world.
Beautiful. Chaya, thank you so much for joining us today. Your words are so heartfelt, and I'm sure you've given everyone a lot to think about.
Thank
Thank you for your joy, and thank you for your wisdom, and for being so profound and sharing your experiences with us. And I only wish you continued success in everything that you do, and how God should just provide you true joy in the future.
Amen. Thank you so much. And you keep up the good work.
Thank you. Thank you. Wow, that was quite a heart-stirring interview with Chaya Teldon. I admit that I found myself tearing up at certain parts. I'm sure that some of you felt the same way when she was describing the passing of of her son, her oldest son, and her reactions to it. What really blew me away was her steadfast faith, and it didn't come off as some kind of just like, okay, this is what we have to do. It just seems so genuine and so a part of herself. And really what she says is, what is the alternative than having this feeling of just trusting in God and just letting go to God? She's a healthy person, she's a joyous person, and she used those tools that she had in her learning to deal with such grief and such sorrow. I loved the first part about her becoming a Balat Tshuva, returning to Judaism. She was not born in the Chabad Hasidic fold. She entered into it. She joined it. She learned about it, and she did it with such conviction. You know what the common theme that seems to flow throughout her interview was that constant conviction to follow a path that led her to be who she is, and that conviction was steadfast, even with the trials of learning that her child had CF, even with after the lung transplant that her child had and the rejection of the body. That steadfast conviction and belief in God was really so beautiful to see, so refreshing to see. I also loved how she explained her role in the chevra kadisha and how she views it in such a positive light, how just the beauty of sending off a body to its place of rest, to sending it off on its next journey. And I found that description really, really fascinating. What did you like about this interview? What touched you? Was there any parts that particularly reached you and taught you something about your own life and about your own situation? I'd really love to hear about it. If you enjoy receiving these interviews, hearing these interviews, please make sure that you are subscribed to Chabad.org/extraordinary. Check us out on Spotify, on Apple, where we are as well, on all podcast platforms, and listen to us while you're on the go. And drop us a line, drop us a heart, drop us a rating. We really, really appreciate every time that you do take the time to rate us or to share a comment or to share feedback about what you enjoyed or any kind of criticism or constructive ideas for us. We love to hear your communication. Thank you again for watching, and thank you so much for being part of our extraordinary community.